This episode on pop pedagogy.
How did Miss Trunchbull get that job?
I don't know. It seemed like a trauma bond.
Like through Matilda, Miss Honey's inner child is healing.
Like, do you think that Miss Honey recognized that? That like, oh shit.
Class dismissed.
Remember how scary your first days at school were, so I'd like you to be especially nice to Matilda.
Captain, my captain. Sit down, Mr. Anderson.
Are you going to teach us anything, or are we just going to sit here?
Welcome to Pop Pedagogy. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Nichole. How's it going?
It's going. Surviving the onslaught of bad news on a day-to-day basis. But,
Yay.
We're hanging in there.
At least, are you snacking on something delicious in the meantime?
I have some chips and salsas.
Well, I'll take advantage of that because I'm also snacking on chips, on potato chips. Yeah, they are paprika flavored.
It's a salty kind of day. Yeah. I feel like we've kind of aligned usually if we're doing sweet or salty, and like today we're both doing salty. Maybe it's because I feel salty about Matilda and Miss Honey.
Good. Okay, so let's start with why did you choose this movie, and just give a quick overview of what it's about.
Yeah, so I think when we were brainstorming movies that we could watch with teacher depictions, Matilda was just like thrown out as, one of the list. And I don't think I saw Matilda, since I was a kid. And the memory I have of Miss Honey is like a sweet, benevolent teacher who helps Matilda deal with her hard life circumstances. I actually didn't remember the plot of the movie at all. Only the part where Matilda does magic, or does telekinesis. So, so that's what's the choice was, yeah.
And that's basically the plot, right? Like she has a hard time, discovers this power, and things get better. I mean, I love that movie. Like I've watched it so many times since I was a kid. Like it's one of my comfort movies, but I had never really paid attention to Miss Honey, under the teacher.
The school is the school itself, and Miss Trunchbull. Like, how did Miss Trunchbull get that job? Anyway, and how
through assassination, right?
I guess, but how has no one called Child Protective Services on, first of all, Matilda's parents, and second of all, Miss Trunchbull? Okay, maybe this is a construct we can explore through, Miss Honey, but I kind of saw her as a bit of an abuse enabler.
I thought that she was traumatized, that she was a very traumatized person.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And, and I think that, to the question, how is this even still allowed? Like there's a part where when Matilda arrives to the school for the first time and she's talking to the kids and the Matilda asks one of the kids, have you told your parents that this is happening, that, Trunchbull is doing all of these? And one of the kids, can't remember her name, she's like, well, would your parents believe this? And, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so real. This does happen, the voices of, who believes children? I mean, yeah. We, it is still an issue that, kids will, if kids denounce or report abuse, it's like, oh, shut up. Because at least in many cultures, kids are not supposed to, they're supposed to stay quiet, basically. Right?
Yeah, but circling back to Miss Honey, she's a witness. You know what
yeah. And she does these silent protesting kind of actions, right?
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Okay, maybe we should rewind a little bit. Just another...
Yeah, what's the movie about, right?
What's the movie about? We kind of got into it right at the beginning. Okay, so Matilda is a movie based on a book by a controversial author, so we're not going to get into the controversy surrounding the author of the book. We're just talking about Miss Honey, and specifically Miss Honey from the 1996 movie Matilda, based on the book. Matilda is a little girl whose parents did not want to have kids, and had poor family planning practices or whatever. So they have Matilda, and then they just don't do it. Like, they don't parent her. They leave her alone all the time. So she grows up precocious, meaning she just is adultified very early in life. And because of that, she becomes hyper intelligent as like a child.
She's inherently curious, it seems. She's
inherently curious. She teaches herself, and I would say like it seems like her advanced like progression is a trauma response and like a necessity to a survival tactic. So like basically because she has to take care of herself, she learns how to do things very quickly. She can read like chapter books by the age of 4. And then her parents forget to put her into school, and her dad meets Miss Trunchbull, likes her because she's an evil, person. Yeah. They get along, and he's like, all right, you're going to go to school with Miss Trunchbull. So he puts her into school, and she shows up, and the kids are like, ooh, you're in for it, girl. I think one of the things I noticed with this movie, too, is that maybe because they get so much bullying from Miss Trunchbull, there isn't bullying among the kids. They kind of like have camaraderie with blah.
Yeah. It's a refreshing contrast to everything that she experiences as soon as she arrives to the world and to the school, basically.
Yeah, and her classroom's very warm. I noticed that the desks were set up like 2 tables facing each other. They aren't in just like rows facing the front, so I thought that was kind of nice. She's got lots of like art and different stuff on the walls that you see later on they cover up when Miss Trunchbull's.
Yeah. And there's a lot of like things, the things that are around the classroom are things that you can see that the kids made themselves, which is a nice practice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And so then she asks the kids to recite their times tables, and she learns that Matilda is very advanced for her age, and so she goes to ask Miss Trunchbull if Matilda can be put in a more advanced level, and Miss Trunchbull basically tells her to GTFO. Matilda can't do that. So the rest of the story is that Miss Trunchbull is evil. She puts kids in this closet full of like nails as like a torture device. She's physically abusive. She's mentally and emotionally abusive. She's all kinds of abusive, this woman. And okay, and then like the big conflict is that we find out Miss Trunchbull is Matilda's aunt, and that, or not Matilda, Miss Honey's aunt. And we find out Miss Trunchbull is Miss Honey's aunt, that she killed her father and stole her inheritance. And so Matilda takes it upon herself to right this wrong and sets Miss Trunchbull up to believe the ghost of Miss Honey's father is haunting her, and tells her, she uses her telekinesis to write on the chalkboard, give Miss Honey back her money and get out of town. And she is scared, and she does. Basically, that's the movie. And then Miss Trunchbull Miss Honey gets her inheritance back, and at the very, very end, adopts Matilda. So we're asked to suspend our disbelief quite a lot in this film. That things
All right, it's a children's movie, right?
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, the book was written in 1980s. I still think the setting of the book, like, I can believe this level of abuse in an educational institution in like maybe the 50s or the 60s in the US where this movie takes place. But
maybe it's what the author saw in his
childhood
or something,
But there are places in the world that still use corporal punishment in schools. Yeah. I don't know if you
I mean, my grandparents talked about, experiencing that when they were in school. So, and that's not like that long ago, maybe like 60 something. No, maybe more. 70 years ago,
Yeah. In Malaysia, when I was training teachers, I think it was like newly banned, and the teachers were kind of upset about it. And it was upsetting to me to hear some of the teachers kind of lament that they can't use like the ruler.
The ruler was so popular. No, and in Peru, I don't know if it's everywhere in the Spanish speaking world, but there's a phrase called that it goes like la letra con sangre entra, meaning like you learn your vowels or you learn your ABC through blood, or your ABC goes in through blood or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
And it talks about like, it makes reference to like, you know, like discipline for learning, right?
Yeah.
And my grandma's generation was kind of, I feel like, because my grandma was a teacher, and with her generation, when she became a teacher, that kind of started shifting away from that, from those violent practices. So I thought a lot about that when I was watching that movie too, because it's very impactful to see Tronchatoro like transport, because also I only watched this movie in Spanish, because in English it just sounds too weird to me. So the names are different.
Okay.
And so Trunchbull is Tronchatoro, and Miss Honey is like La Señorita Miel. And
nice.
But yeah, it's really, you have to be like, okay, this is fiction, but also this represents like very real old school practices in a way, right? But yeah, I think that the first thing that kind of caught my attention when I was trying to focus on Miss Honey and her pedagogical practice was that I didn't see much of her actual teaching, you know, beyond that first scenes of the class review. And I think what stands out to me the most is just her demeanor, like her sweet demeanor as a contrast to the principal, to the parents. Yeah. And how, in a way, throughout the movie, she just kind of like goes through this personal journey where she finds her courage through her care and advocacy for her students, and especially in particular through Matilda, which I think she does because she sees so much of herself in Matilda, probably, right? And it's like the whole thing. And that's why it was just like, I don't know, it seemed like a trauma bond. Like a lot of what happened between them, no?
Yeah, actually, like one of that came up for me a lot with the relationship between Miss Honey and Matilda. The other thing that I was thinking about a lot with the kids and the teachers in the school is around like social emotional support for like kids who are traumatized, because I worked a lot with refugee populations, and also when you're talking about like why corporal punishment should be banned in schools, when we are scared, when we're in fight or flight, learning is almost impossible, right? Because like the parts of the brain that retain information shut down in favor of like the prefrontal cortex, which is in fight or flight. Yeah, exactly. So when you're trying to teach kids who are going through like a traumatic experience, there's a lot of like psychosocial work you have to do to even, you know, and a lot of times the work of education in that circumstance is to provide safe space rather than to try to get kids to like a certain academic standard. It's really like, am I providing a space where they can escape whatever's happening? And sometimes it's conflict, sometimes it's natural disaster, you know, but War Child has a
in that case, which I guess we see, you know, like in that when you were mentioning about the classroom, you know, it's so colorful, there's so much art, and also when the little girl, like the one with the braids, you know, she's asked to spell a word, and she you know, oh, we learned this kind of like song, poem, this rhyme, right? So like teaching through the arts and like, you know, this
as
things.
like a reading teacher, I didn't think that was good, like literacy pedagogy, because you're not teaching phonics.
No. And it's more like a rhyme, like a poem thing. Like it was to me, it just came back a lot to like just art practices, right?
Yeah, I think like learning a poem is fine. I think if you're having your kids like memorize how to spell something that way, it's not a good way to teach someone spelling. yeah, I think for me, I like a lot more explicit phonics where you're teaching all the sounds of all the letters and having them learn how to sound things out that way. But as a tool of engagement and creativity and kind of psychosocial learning, I think that it's a good thing to do. And I think that's like Miss Honey's major strength is helping these kids through the trauma they're experiencing in the school that she's also experiencing and has experienced from the abuser. But she also participates in enabling the abuse because she doesn't report it, for one. And most teachers, they are required to report any abuse. It's like a duty of care. So if they see it, they have to report it. But like teachers are mandatory reporters. So Miss Honey, as a teacher in presumably a public school, would have to, first of all, report Matilda's parents because they're neglecting her, and that's abuse.
And she goes to her house, right? And she meets her parents and everything. So she knows she's a witness to that.
Yeah, exactly. And she would it would be a mandatory reporting situation for Miss Trunchbull as well. And I empathize a lot with that because I reported abuse that I witnessed at an educational institution, but this was in China, where
you told me about it.
Yeah, so I saw a teacher. I was working in a summer camp, and there was another teacher. He was in his mid-50s, and the students were between 14 and 16 or 17, I think, in the summer camp. And I saw him grab a 16-year-old girl and force her to sit on his lap. And he held her there. She was visibly uncomfortable. And I told him off at the time. And his response to me was, it's cultural differences. So he had the mentality that because he was in a different country, that he could do what he wanted, basically. Mm-hmm. And I reported him to the school, and they didn't do anything about it. Right. So they kept him on as a teacher, and I got harassed by him after that. And so I had to leave that institution because now I was getting harassed for reporting him. So I can empathize a lot with Miss Honey and enabling abuse and being afraid of the repercussions of that, or having to, own potential repercussions of that. But I do think she had an obligation to report, and she didn't do it. And she also had, go ahead.
I mean, in the case of Miss Honey, I think when she tells Matilda, all of the story about, her dark secret and stuff like that, it is quite evident that that cycle and that connection of abuse that she felt, or that she's been subjected to since she was a kid, it just never ended. She just never escaped from that cycle of violence. And, working under her abuser is just
not good. Yeah.
Very, very fucked up.
I know.
And I think that's why, towards the, towards the end of the movie, when she's when she sees that what Matilda can do with her powers, and after, Matilda kind of takes on the role of the adult of let me solve this shit.
She's very parentified. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if they get too close, even unintentionally, even when Matilda highly empathizes and wants to right the wrongs that Miss Honey suffered. And so she goes to Trunchbull's house and starts, trying to reclaim the doll and the chocolates and all of these. And I think that's kind of where Miss Honey, even though she's oh my gosh, no, let's get everything back, she also sees oh shit, this little girl, she has through these powers, right? This is safe. I can maybe she even feels protected by Matilda towards the end of the movie, so that she can rebel and be no, I'm not, I think she tells Trunchbull, I'm not 7 anymore, you cannot control me like you used to, this is not okay. And finally stands up to her in that way.
Yeah, Matilda's kind of a metaphor for Miss Honey's inner child. Like through Matilda, Miss Honey's inner child is healing. But one of the things that I wrote down about Miss Honey is that the hijinks they get into, even some of the exchanges of like backstory and that type of information, would be way more acceptable if Miss Honey was like a fun aunt or an adult who wasn't in this, authoritative position as educator. If she was more like relational to Matilda, but like her being in the position as her teacher, even if she was maybe a teacher who lived down the street and wasn't her teacher, I think it would be a little bit different. The other thing that I thought was like super inappropriate is telling Matilda to go home with her without letting anybody else know.
I was gonna say that I think like if that story even had been shared, in the classroom, like with the however traumatizing, if it had been shared with the whole class, like with the whole students, as opposed to this very, intimate, way too close kind of environment, maybe that would have been different. But yeah, I think it was just, they just got way, way too close, way, way too fast. And it was, again, I think it was just a trauma. So,
yeah.
Like, do you think that Miss Honey recognized that like, oh shit,
No.
I am really up in the head, and my teaching is a way of, like saving little kids, or, providing this haven to little kids that may or may not, be having a hard time. And also like witnessing the horrible management of Trunchbull that Trunchbull does in the school. But I don't know how much of what is the level of self-awareness that would have, saved these.
And I wonder if it's relatable to when you as a teacher have a student that is experiencing trauma and abuse, and you have limits to how much you can intervene. I think that's something that, watching Miss Honey, she's obviously like this is an extreme case, like the level of abuse inside of the school and the level of neglect of Matilda's parents, and like the whole situation is maybe not extreme, because I know in the real world there's much more extreme cases than this, but in the context of this like fictional world of Matilda, the context of the school is quite what's the word I want? Like it's not really realistic. Like it's not really realistic that there's a woman like Miss Trunchbull running a school.
Right. And also there's a lot of like isolation. Yeah. There's a lot of isolation, right? Like, do you think that Miss Honey, like, did she go through any sort of like professional development training or something like that? You know, is she part of a community of teachers?
And like, where are the other teachers? Yeah, where are the other teachers?
I don't remember seeing any other teachers
in the school. And what do they think about the situation? It's actually like just Miss Honey and like Miss Trunchbull. That's the whole school.
Yeah, basically. I mean, and the movie is about Matilda, of course, in the end. But yeah, like I don't even remember seeing the faces of other teachers,
No.
But there are other teachers, there are other classrooms.
For sure. But I guess the thing that I'm trying to relate to is if I was in the position of Miss Honey and, there's a student in my class who, and I've done all the things I can do professionally, what would I do, like, to support this student? Would I break the rules? Would I, knowing I'm a safe person, invite them? I don't think I would personally, because I'm a kind of a stickler for child safety processes. But I mean, if I was Miss Honey, I might do something like convince the parents to, like, she asked the parents if she can do tutoring and stuff, but I don't think she puts it in a way that they would accept it. If she was like, I can get this girl off your hands, and you don't have to watch her, and I'll just, take her with me for a couple hours a day and you can watch your shows, I think that her parents would be like, yeah, take her,
Yeah, she doesn't sell it very well.
Yeah. And then you would have like...
Is she socially awkward with adults?
Miss Honey?
Like, Miss Honey. Yeah. When she goes to like tell Trunchbull like, oh, you know, I have this really gifted student. Like she also doesn't, you know, obviously Trunchbull is this like super violent, super, you know, like
she's afraid.
volcano
She's afraid of
eruption
Miss
kind of like,
Trunchbull.
yeah. And so she doesn't give her a chance. But and then when she goes to talk to the parents, it's almost like a similar thing, you know. It's just like she cannot get her point across. She does not have these negotiation skills, you know. She tries.
It's the opposite of Matilda, because Matilda is very good at manipulating adults to do what she wants, like
and staying calm.
She manipulates the cops to get out of the garage. I mean, she does use a little bit of telekinesis, but you know, she's like, I don't think you have a warrant. And, you know, she's very direct. She's got a very authoritative way of coming across.
The power of information. You know, she's read so much. She's so well read. She's just like, listen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And then I think Miss Honey her communication is the opposite of that. She's insecure. She's not very confident. And in that way, within the, you know, the movie, Matilda and Miss Honey serve as kind of like they're mirrors of each other and of responses to trauma, and their relationship helps them, I think, each heal those parts of them that are traumatized. So within the movie, I think their relationship is good. But if we're looking at Miss Honey as a teacher in the real world, no.
It's very problematic.
She serves the purpose of of what they're trying to do with the movie. And I think when I was thinking about Matilda as a movie for kids, I thought the purpose of this movie is to show a child that supposedly is helpless, like, become powerful in the face of like overwhelming odds from institutions that seemingly have a lot more power than her, and she's able to kind of like maneuver through them in a way that she like takes her power back.
Yeah.
And that's a good message for kids, for sure.
Escape the darkness, right?
Yeah.
Like just get away from this, like find her way out of this like cruelty that she's surrounded by. And that's kind of, like that's what the movie ends in a very positive note, in like, you know, they found the loving family that they both were looking for, that they always wished for. And Matilda, I like that. And I don't know how it is in English, but the narrator at the end says something like, you know, Matilda just decided to enjoy life, and that was obviously something that she did because she is very smart, you know, and that is the smart thing to do, to just look for pursue happiness, pursue joy. I thought that was very nice. But yeah, man, like in real life, it also made me try to remember, like when I was in university, like we had all of these classes about, you know, like methodology and didactics and stuff like that. But there was one class in my first year of college that was called like human development. That was kind of like this, both like where we talked about the physiological and the psychological development of humans, you know, trying to understand like, you know, learning theory and stuff like connected to learning theory. But there was also like a lot of self-reflection. But the really, like, I think the kind of education or development that could help somebody, like a teacher with all of the great intentions and all of the care and all of the, you know, the I don't know, the protective instinct that are the nice things about Miss Honey, but surrounded with all of this trauma. Like, how do you help someone in her position to be the best teacher that she can be? You know, is there like a professional development opportunity?
There is. Like, I mean, a lot of, so the teachers who support like refugee students or like education in conflict and crisis, there's a lot of curricula for helping those educators incorporate psychosocial learning into the classroom. So for example, War Child UK, I think, has a really good program for psychosocial learning.
More not only about the traumatized students, but about like, you know, a traumatized teacher, right? Like, 'cause there's like the outward work that you have to do to protect these kids, but then there's a lot of like inside work that you have to do to like, first of all, recognize how, you know, the trauma that you have lived through also is affecting you, and you know, like the decisions that you make in regards of how you relate and, you know, reporting or not and stuff like that.
I'm trying to think if I've ever come across that in any training programs. I'm not sure that I have.
I remember doing some teacher trainings where we asked teachers, like, you know, doing some professional development trainings for teachers, where we had some activities where we asked teachers to remember like their childhood, you know, like, and how certain things that they experienced as kids felt to them. And like, even like, you know, going back to, hey, like, were you a wanted kid? Which was maybe like a little bit too intimate, but it was a very like, you know, let's get real kind of thing. We're also humans. We also were kids. And just kind of like, putting teachers in that position of just like high self-awareness, you know?
Yeah, I think it also comes a lot down to school leadership too. And if you allow teachers to bring their full selves to the school, and if you facilitate that in like the professional development that you do with the teachers that, you know, are under your leadership. And if you discuss like, how does that show up in the classroom? Because I certainly remember having teachers, especially in high school, like there was this one teacher who taught math, and everyone knew that if you asked her something about her chickens, she would spend the rest of the time talking about her chickens, and she wouldn't do any math. And
my gosh, I had a math teacher that every time you ask her about Jesus, she would just like stop everything and just talk about Jesus.
Oh yeah, because you were in Catholic school.
No, this was in elementary school. Like she was, she converted to Catholicism like late in her life, and she was just very, very grateful for what the religion did in her life. So like half of our class was like actual math, and then the other half was just like talking about how awesome
what is
Jesus
it about math teacher?
I don't know, man. But yeah, like back to this school, like definitely that was not a priority of leadership.
Of like helping Miss Honey process her like
definitely not
her like childhood trauma, so that she's not letting it interfere with her relationships with the students. I'll have to go back. Like I've read a couple of books about like teacher-student relationships and like mentoring, but I don't know how much they ask the professional to reflect on their own issues, you know, as opposed to just understanding the practice of engaging with the student. That's an interesting question. I think I will research more on that. And if I find good things, I will share them on the website.
Nice. And so just to kind of wrap up,
I was going to say, like, do we give Miss Honey gold star? For me, this is the first one I'm going to say, keep trying, Miss Honey.
Yeah, definitely keep trying. The good intentions are there. And I mean, at the end, you know, she becomes a principal. The kids don't want to leave the school. So that sounds like she's doing a good job, right? That she eventually, or maybe that's what the kids are into. I don't know. But yeah, definitely keep trying. Definitely look for more professional development opportunities and go to therapy. Like, we should all go to therapy, you know?
Yeah. Like process your trauma so you can engage more professionally with your students. And keep trying, Miss Honey. You're getting there. You're getting there. All right. So next time we're what's next for us? We're doing a book. Is that the next one?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the last one. The last one of the season. Before the end. Yeah. So the next episode, we're going to be reviewing, A Deadly Education, which is actually a book. This is the first, book that we're doing. And it's going to be, I feel like for me, this is going to be a really interesting conversation because it's about a school. There are no teachers in the school, and everything in the school wants to kill you. And the whole goal of this education is just to survive and get out.
Survival skills. Nice.
Survival skills. So I think it'll be a really interesting thing to look at the pedagogy of the Scholomance in A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. So grab your snacks and we will see you then.
Thank you, Nichole. Talk to you
Thanks.
soon.
Bye, Melissa.
Bye.